Hey!
Hi friends! It's another What We Read video
Yes, it
from
is.
us, which is very exciting. We're catching up on these.
Yeah,
so
you can go on them reading challenges, that kind of deal.
Yeah. We're gonna quickly go into the books that I'll be talking about in this video. Majority of them were arcs that I read. Only one of them was in eGalley, which is why I don't actually have it to physically show you. And I'll start with that one. So it is a book called Bonecryer's Moon, which is by Catherine Purdy. It has this gorgeous cover by Charlie Bowater. Bonecryer's Moon is about two best friends, and they live in a world where bone criers are an essential part of society. Bone criers essentially ferry the dead from the land of living to wherever they're meant to go, whether it's their version of heaven or their version of hell. And in order to become a bone crier, you have to make the ultimate sacrifice. You use this flute when you turn a certain age, I think it's 16, and when you play it, your true love will come, you have to kill your true love. And it just so happens that there is this guy, I'm pretty sure his name was Nathaniel. I read this one a while ago, so I actually can't remember the details as well as I would like. He actually wants revenge of the bone criers because he saw his father get lured by a bone crier and killed by a bone crier. And he has teamed up with a pair of siblings whose father also died because of the bone criers. It unravels into the story where you realize that there is an underlying conspiracy in the society of bone criers that also has political effects on their kingdom and country. What I like the best about it is the lore. I think the idea of bone criers and their society and their rules and like what makes them bone criers is very interesting and fascinating. That is the thing that drove me to continue reading the story, because I wanted to see like how that lore would continue to play out. I also really like that there is a very strong relationship between the two girls. Like their friendship is also another thing that I really appreciated about the story, because it is so rarely the thing that is one of the main, like, I guess, like plot points in any fantasy novel, or at least I rarely see it, because usually it's like an individual journey and then eventually they become friends. But no, these two were like childhood friends, they grew up together, and so their friendship and their loyalty to each other is pretty strong. I will say the thing that I didn't particularly like about it is that there's like a weird lull in the plot in the middle where nothing really was happening. Like, it felt like there should be something happening, and they were doing things, but it also didn't have this sense of urgency. Because what happens early on in the story is that instead of being able to kill her true love, Elise, who is the one who goes through the ritual, she gets taken by him. Because, you know, he wants revenge. It feels like there was a big lull in the middle, and then the romantic subplot, not my favorite either. The way it ends was a little bit more exciting. There was a little more action, which was always appreciated, but overall, and you can probably tell just based on how I'm talking about it, it wasn't necessarily the most memorable YA story I've ever read. There is going to be a sequel. I don't think I'm going to read it, which should tell you how I felt about this book. If you are interested in the idea of these bone criers and the lore, maybe check it out for yourself. Maybe you'll like it a little more than I did.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say about that. The next book I'm going to talk about is another fantasy. It's like an urban fantasy-ish, sort of, and it's Wicked As You Wish by Rin Chupeco. This is the first book in her 100 Names for Magic series. So the way I talked about this one to my friend is to say that it is basically like Once Upon a Time if it were a CW show and it had some form of Filipino like lore woven into it.
Cute.
Throw in all this other fairy tale stuff and other lore as well. It's a fun mix of things, and I think it's a good representation of what Filipino culture is like too, because we do have things that are very specific to our country, but it's actually blended in very well with more Western mythologies, because that's how we all grew up at this point, because we grew up in this cultural melting pot, and it's hard to take that out of our identity and just keep it Filipino, you know what I mean? So in this story, there is a magical kingdom of Avalon, and now that kingdom is cut off from the rest of the world because the Snow Queen kind of encased it in ice. And on the run from this kingdom is Prince Alexei. He's the sole survivor of the royal family, and so he gets placed into like the home or like the neighborhood of this girl named Tala. Tala and her family are part of the Makilings, and they're known for canceling out magic. What ends up happening is he gets tracked down because the Firebird, which is a legendary creature that is pretty much well known in most mythology and fairy tales, but in this story in particular, it is a big symbol for the royal family, shows up on Prince Alexei's birthday, and he gets tracked down, and so he and Tala and a couple of other people who are assigned to his protection detail have to go on the run in their attempt to recover the kingdom of Avalon and beat the bad guys. And it is like this fun romp. It reminds me a little bit of Percy Jackson, like specifically the series, where it's like it's an adventure story and you're with your friends and allies and you kind of have to figure out how to save the world, but you're all really young, and you have like the weight of all of this lore and mythology and history on your shoulders. It was very fun and very entertaining. I really like how it ended too, because I was just like, that's a plot twist I didn't see coming. I'm very interested in seeing how she carries on with the series because it ends on a very definitive note. Like the big plot point where they're trying to figure out how to save Avalon, it obviously ends at a very good place for that. I am curious to see where the series is gonna go now, considering the twist, it's not really a twist, considering the turn of events at the end of it. There's definitely gonna be a ripple effect at some point, and we're gonna have to see how that plays out in the second book. So this is a series that I will definitely be continuing with. The last book I'm gonna talk about is actually one of the best books I've read all year, and that is Little Universes by Heather Demetrios. This is a sister story. There are two sisters, they live in California, and they lose their parents when there is this major typhoon in Malaysia. So May and Hannah are forced to basically relocate their lives and go live with their aunt and uncle in Boston. So everything they thought was gonna be their reality changes. May is the one who has always aspired to become an astronaut and to go into space. That was always her dream and something she connected with her dad on in a lot of ways. And Hannah, on the other hand, is struggling with addiction and a lot of other things. Actually, she has a lot of personal insecurities and demons that she is running away from and trying to deal with, and indulging in drugs is her escape of choice. And so it is the story of how their relationship is super complicated because they don't actually communicate on the same wavelength, and they're also keeping secrets from each other in this story because they don't want the other person to get hurt. What really struck me with this story is like it is a messy story, and their relationships are so complicated and so complex as sisters. For me, if an author is able to capture that in a way that feels realistic, like you can tell that they love each other, but they also kind of just want to strangle each other at points in this story. You know what I mean? Like it's frustrating, but you love them, and that's why it's frustrating for you. And she got that like attitude so well. It is really dark also because of Hannah's addiction and all of the things she goes through in the story. It is a lot to read, and it was hard on my feelings. Even as someone who's never personally experienced it or known someone who's experienced it, it was very hard to read. And I can't speak to how authentically that was portrayed, but it felt very authentic to me as a reader. I like the exploration of their relationships, not only with each other, but like outside of each other, with like their extended family, with their parents, with their friends, with their love interests. She did it really well because she wove it in a way that felt true to both of their characters with their very different personalities. Like I was just along for the ride basically from like the very first chapter, and I just kept going until I hit the end, and it was so satisfying and so gut-wrenching and so emotional, and I really, really liked this book. I can't say it's the easiest of reads, and I also feel like you shouldn't read it if you're not prepared for this kind of content you're gonna get with it, but it is such an impactful story, and I think that if you do end up reading it, if you're interested enough, and if you feel like you can handle this sort of content at this time, then you should definitely check it out.
Alrighty, more comics. I'm gonna start with Superwoman 1 Rebirth. Now, let's set the stage here because this was, like, I did not know what to expect. Okay. And when it happened, I'm like, oh my god, I need more. That's kind of this. So we'll set the stage of DC
That's
Rebirth.
A rare reaction from you.
Right? It's very strange. And plus Superwoman, I thought, I wonder what this is gonna be about. So DC Rebirth, what happened basically when the world knit itself together after Lord knows which crisis that was, we now have two Supermen. We have Superman, because we have Superman and Clark, we have Superman Clark Kent who married Lois Lane and have baby Cinnamon Roll John Kent from the olden-timey worlds. We haven't seen this guy for like ever because when the New 52 came out like ages ago, we had a new Superman, a younger Cal who never married anybody, who did not sort of end up with Lois, who kind of dated Wonder Woman for a while, like a long ass while. And he had that kind of like almost shell kind of suit where there's like armor plates that sort of whatever, as opposed to like the semi-spandexy Superman that we used to sort of know and love, that was murdered by Doomsday and sort of came back, blah, blah, blah. So those two guys exist now. Okay. For a brief hot minute, there were two Supermen in the world. And the one guy, Superman, who married Lois Lane and had John, didn't want to do the whole Superman thing. He hung up the cape because there was this other younger dude that was doing that. And he's like, more power to you. This is your world. Okay. Because I just got grafted onto this thing for whatever reason because of time streams and alternate universes. So this is that Superman's world now. That Superman died. He disappeared, well, after he he kind of liquefied into energy or whatever the heck that is that these kind of Supermen do. And that's it. And who does he leave behind? He leaves behind Lana Lang, who was his best friend growing up in this universe. And of course the Lois Lane that he never got together with, who did not have John and blah, 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 blah. Totally different people. Them two, they become Superwoman. That's right, count them too. You've got Lois who's presenting all of the Superman type, traits. Okay. The hearing, the everything. And she comes to Lana because who apparently taught this world's Superman how to use his powers, if not a young Lana Lang. Fair. So as teenagers and best friends forever, Lana actually taught Clark. This is what you do with your heat vision. This is what you do with like your flight and everything. And when Lois obviously kind of found out, okay, that's what you did for Clark, now do it for me. So now we have a Superwoman. She's running around with the spandex and the cape and everything, and we've got Lex Luthor, who's got a total jonesing to be the Superman. It's like, I'm Superman now that the Superman you know is dead.
Whatever. Like,
and this is
over yourself.
And this is before John's dad decides to go, you know what, it's time to be Superman again, because Bruce and Dan actually show up to his door in Kansas. And they're like, yeah, you gotta do, right? And it's like, yeah, you gotta do this thing. So, you know, I'm Superman now, and then crap happens with Lex's, like, plans. And
Doesn't always.
And it's not enough for just one Superwoman to do this.
Has to be two.
Has to be two. And out of nowhere, Lana pulls out her trump card as the second Superwoman, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And she exhibits the kind of electromagnetic powers, because for another hot minute, ages ago, there were two Supermen also. Superman Blue and Superman Red. It feels like feels like Mountain Dew. Like there's Mountain Dew and there's Mountain Dew Code Red. But it feels that way, and that's what they do. It is madcap crazy from there. Okay. It centers on Lana. I kind of want to know what happens next.
Oh,
so if you're looking,
that's a good sign.
Yeah. So if you're looking for and Lana's dating John Henry Irons, yeah, Steel,
oh,
like
okay.
the other Superman with like it's like Iron Man meets Superman.
Yeah.
But take away the Kryptonian powers and just make the suit super. Anyway, point is, it's a doozy. It's fresh to me.
It's a good kind of doozy, then.
Yeah, I kind of know what happens next. Now, am I going to spend like another $9? I'll let that simmer a little and see if I want it. Okay, next would be Batgirl Volume 3. Barbara Gordon is now in charge of like Gordon Clean Energy or whatever the heck that is. She has her own power company, guys. So she basically, like, now that her spine is fine, and then she starts...
You want to rhyme that on purpose.
Sure. And she's literally walking around kicking ass again. She's on a different path. And I mentioned a couple of reads ago that she's, you know, the path to Oracle, that grown up sort of mature version of herself running the thing. She's taking a different path now that she's not going through sort of like what the old Oracle and the old world went through. I didn't want to read Batgirl anymore because it just wasn't my thing anymore. The direction wasn't bad per se, it's just not my thing. But on the front cover you'll see Dick Grayson's on there. So I have to. I'm sorry. I am.
That is like the one thing that's guaranteed to get Micah's attention, actually.
Fun with Dick and Babs is infinitely my favorite thing in the world. I'll take any form or version of it that I can, because I'm
I blame you though.
Because I'm one of those guys. Like that's how I'm one of those folks who are like Dick and Babs forever.
I'm Dick and Babs forever.
That is my canon, and so they do this. There are a lot of allusions to their wayward, ill-spent youth, and they have a go at the whole situation. Now, will you get your Dick and Babs fix if you're that desperate? Probably, you know. But then again, people have learned to make. But then again, people have learned to make booze in like prison. So, you know, the dearth of something that you do like will make other things palatable. So I will recommend that. Finally, Detective Comics 5. Now, I have been a fan of DC Detective Comics Rebirth series because it features a lot of heavy hitters. It's almost kind of like The Outsiders, but on the inside. Because it's Tim Drake. It's Red Rob. Well, he's gonna be Drake. Like, I know, right? Drake. All right. Fine.
I can't take that seriously.
Right, I can't either. I just can't like.
Anyway, I mean, I love Tim, don't get me wrong.
Tim is my favorite Robin of all time. So I love that he's in there. He's leading the charge. Detective Comics 5 happens after Tim sort of disappears and nobody knows where he went. I was pretty bummed about that. But then apparently he splinched into I say splinched like that's a real thing. No, he did. All body parts are fine. He got thrust into another universe that my favorite Teen Titans universe, where Tim was sort of part of the team with Jeff Johns, touched on, which is a future Dark Justice League, where the current then Teen Titans were the new Wonder Woman, new Batman, new Superman. He comes face to face with the older, jaded, terrible, fallen version of himself as Batman, and that guy follows him into the present. And it's such a crazy thing. If you're a huge Jeff Johns Teen Titans run fan, they take that alternate universe and they milk that thing for all of the emotional beats, because we have a young, you know, obviously, you know, non-jaded Tim Drake, right, who was like super smart and so helpful, and to see him as Batman, the guy who said I would never be Batman, but he ends up being Batman. Do it for that. Do it for that. It takes the Jeff Johns thing and just makes it super awesome. The Outsiders, or whatever the heck they're called, Batwoman, Clayface, those guys, they sort of kind of beat the crap out of, well, they try to beat the crap out of. There's a lot of Tim Drake versus the world action there. And because it's Tim, it's not like a villain. To see the alternate universe for him, right, where things didn't turn out as bad yet, that was painful and powerful. So hits all of the beats. Love it. Pick it up if you like the Bat Family in any way, form, or fashion. The Detective Comics run is gold.
So the next 3 books are all contemporary. We're going to start with Anna K, which is by Jenny Lee. This is a modern day spin on Anna Karenina. I have never read Anna Karenina, but I will say that I surprisingly was really into this book. I'm going to start this right off by saying this is like Gossip Girl and Crazy Rich Asians, except with the Anna Karenina like structure. Obviously that means that there are a lot of content warnings for this one because there's a lot of cheating and sex and drugs and alcohol and like it's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. But it was like one of those books where I read it because these characters are making bad choices and it's a train wreck that I can't look away from. The story centers around this popular it girl named Anna Kay, and she gets called back to Manhattan by her older brother to help him sort out his love life because his girlfriend just found out he had been cheating on her. Or had cheated on her. And that's the starting point of the story, but it continues on. You sort of set the stage for their lives as like Manhattan elite, and you get to know like the people in their lives and see how they connect to one another. I'm not gonna really get into much more of the story than that, but I can't say I like this is a new favorite or I love this story, but I did think it was an interesting like thing to read where, again, characters making bad choices. Sometimes they had consequences, sometimes they didn't have consequences. And there were a lot of not okay things that happened in this book, but they were portrayed in a way that made it interesting to me. I like that the characters in this book, particularly the females, they had a lot of agency. Like it felt like they were making choices for themselves, and that's always cool. A good thing. And I like the variety of perspectives you're getting in it as well. Like you have Anna's perspective, you kind of get her brother's perspective, you also get their friend's perspective. So it was like an interesting mix of people. It's not gonna work for everyone because the way it's written is, I don't know, it's very particular, I guess, for this writer. There's just like a certain like way that it ebbs and flows in storytelling that feels very visual. Like you're reading it, but you can also visualize it at the same time, which makes sense because this writer happens to be a screenwriter. I was just fascinated the entire way. Like I knew it was going to be a train wreck, and knowing how Anna Karenina ends, I was like, it's probably going to be a train wreck. And like every time someone made a bad choice, I was like, well, there's another bad choice.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
But that's the point, I think. That's just what this story is. And if you go into it knowing that, you'll probably feel a little bit more inclined to continue reading
It's kind of like watching the Titanic, movie. It's just,
basically.
You know what's going to say.
So I actually have a better, like, more coherent, like, review on the blog for this. I'm going to link that down below if you want to check it out. The content warnings are also there as well, so feel free.
Cool.
And then I'm going to talk about 4 Days of You and Me by Miranda Keenely. This is a book about a couple named Alex and Lulu, and it basically chronicles their relationship using 4 dates a year apart. So starting their freshman year of high school until their senior year of high school. And it chronicles the ups and downs of their relationship set against the backdrop of their class field trips. I like the concept of the story a lot. It's interesting to me because one of the things Miranda says about it in the acknowledgements is that when you travel, like it gives you sort of like a perspective shift a little bit, and it's interesting to see a relationship against that backdrop, I guess is what I wanted to say. And I like the variety of the trips they take. I thought the characters and their group of friends were interesting to read about. But what I will say is that, like, I had to keep reminding myself they were teenagers. They were allowed to grow up and make bad relationship choices. They were very frustrating to me at the time because they had a lot of growing up to do. And you see them do it in the course of the story, but it was really, like, hard sometimes because you were like, but you could just be like... I digress. The point is, conceptually, this book has such a strong idea for it, and I think it'll fascinate a lot of readers to see like this year to year to year change in their relationship and to try to figure out like what went wrong, what went right. It's also fun to see the traveling aspect of it. They go to a science museum in the first one, and then they take a couple of other trips. I'm not going to tell you to where because spoilers, but it's really fun. It reminds me a little bit sort of like Emery Lord and Katie Cotugno and Jen E. Smith a little bit. So there is that. If you like any of those authors, you might want to try and pick this one up as well. It was good. Not my new favorite from this author, but it was a solid story, and I would still recommend checking it out. It also reads so fast because it's not very long, which is a bonus. And the last book I'm going to talk about in this video is one that was very, very popular on Instagram for some time, and also booktube for some time. And that book is The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. This is the story of a girl named Kala, and she has grown up with her mom and her stepdad in Toronto, and one day she gets word that her estranged father actually has lung cancer. And so she receives an invitation to go to Alaska, where he lives, and to sort of like spend time with him since he's sick and all. And since her circumstances allow for it, she goes on this trip. And when she's there, she gets to meet her dad, and of course it's a little awkward because they haven't seen each other in 24 years. She also gets to meet all the people in his life, including this grumpy like pilot that might as well be his son, named Jonah. Going into this, I was really nervous because it has so much hype and so many people love this book, and I was just like, what if I don't love it though? Because I had read a book by this author previously, but I did not really particularly enjoy it. I didn't like the characters or feel very strongly about the romance. Luckily, I really like The Simple Wild, and it is really good to me because it has a romantic element to it. I'm not gonna pretend that it doesn't exist because that's actually one of the best parts of the book too. But what I really like about this is that it's sort of Kala's journey to understanding herself better and also to understanding her father better and their relationship as she stays in Alaska and gets to know what his life is like and what, you know, what really happened all those years ago between her dad and her mom. It's a beautiful story in that sense because not only do you see Kala sort of come into her own, which is always a fun thing to see in a story, you also read all of this description about Alaska and it sounds amazing. Like, I already wanted to visit Alaska, and then I read this book and I was like, still want to visit Alaska even more. It was just interesting. It was really well written. It had me like from the first page until the very end, though I will say it wrapped up a little quickly for my liking, but overall I am so happy to report that I actually really enjoyed The Simple Wild, and I definitely want to read the next book in the series, which is called Wild at Heart. Those are all the books that we are talking about in today's What We Read. If you've read any of them or want to read any of them, feel free to leave a comment. And we will see you guys with next week's video. Bye!